Hello, Ben Norcott from TheAthleteCoach.com here. Today I wanted to talk about 5 in-between week loading systems that 2 of the most successful strength and conditioning coaches in rugby league and rugby union have used. And why I wanted to look at these 5 systems is they're so similar it is scary. First, if you don't know who Dan Baker is, Dan Baker worked for the Brisbane Broncos for over 17 years in the NRL. He won multiple premierships. Look up any strength and power studies that involve collision-based sports or even strength and power studies for sports in general. Most of the work that they've referenced is Dan Baker, so he really led the way in terms of research in the early days and still does a lot of work with Push currently and too as well lecturing on strength and power. Now Ashley Jones looked after the Crusaders in the Super Rugby. Before that he did a lot of work as well with different teams in Australia, moved over to New Zealand in the 90s and really set up the Crusaders as being one of the most successful Super Rugby franchises. Actually, they are the most successful Super Rugby franchise in terms of wins and finals. Now, where did this information come from? So for Dan, most of the loading that we're talking about today came from the Australian Strength and Conditioning Coaching course level 2, while Ashley Jones has produced a huge amount of work on Get Strength, Elite Lifts, and a couple of ebooks, and one in particular, Engineering Physical Performance, where he basically just gives all his training plans and sessions and loading in there. Again, this is a comprehensive look at all of the loading that they use, just 5 that are extremely similar. So what are the 5 systems or classifications of the systems? Linnaeus Stable, Linnaeus Stepwise, Linear Undulating, Accumulation and Intensification, and Wave-like. So I'll go into depth on how each one programs there in those categories. Let's jump straight into it. So first we've got Linnaeus Stable, but before we go through all of these details down here, just so you know how this is set up and how it works. So we've got week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, Dan Baker 1, Ashley Jones, and Dan Baker 2. That's what the initials stand for. Now you'll notice that Ashley's work tends to have a 4-week loading, while Dan Baker's tends to have an 8-week loading. And that comes from their sports themselves. So in the NRL, the season back when most of this work was released was over 20 weeks and still currently is. And they had long seasons where they had a long time to plan and organise their coaching. So that's why he would use 8 weeks. While with Super Rugby, it was a very short competition when most of this work was released from Ashley Jones. At that point, it only ran for 12 weeks. Also, they had an extremely short pre-season because the national provincial competition would run quite late, therefore really shortening their pre-season. And it's something that Australian Rugby Union has experienced over the last 4 years. So it's gone from these longer pre-seasons down to shorter pre-seasons because of the NRC in Australia. And most European teams are like that as well. The length of their competition is so much longer that the preparation period is shorter. That's why the in-between week planning is crucial to get increases during the season. So let's go first straight into Dan's number 1. So 3 sets of 10 reps at 60% of their 1 RM, then it's 3 sets of 10 at 65, 3 sets of 8 at 70, and 3 sets of 8 at 75. In this Linnaeus Stable, Ashley Jones's work is exactly the same. And I've just graphed both of those together across here so you can actually see the Linnaeus Stable format progressing up. Now let's take a look at Dan Baker's second 4 week in this type of cycle of training, the Linnaeus Stable. It's got 3 at 6 at 80%, 3 at 6 at 85, 3 at 5 at 88, and 3 at 5 at 90. So you can see it's just basically a linear progression in terms of intensity with some modifications of the reps, but not the number of sets. Jumping into the next one. So we've got 4 at 10 at 60% for Dan in his first 4 weeks. Then it's 4 at 10 at 65 for his second, 4 at 10 at 68, Then there's a down period here in terms of we've come down sets and reps, we've jumped up by intensity here. So he's dropped the volume here. That's why I've put this in red. Now, if we look across the bottom here, Ashley Jones's loading in this Linnaeus Stepwise is exactly the same, except for when we come to this week. The only thing that's different is that still 68% down here. He's just got 4 sets of 8 because he's not having a down week there. He's moving to a different form of progression post this period, or repeating this cycle again, depending on what he's looking at. So Dan's work in his second 4 weeks in Linnaeus Stable is 3 at 5 at 83%, 3 at 5 at 87, 3 at 3 at 95, and 2 at 3 at 97. And so I've got their first 4 weeks plotted on here in percentages, and Dan's second. Now let's look at linear undulating. So again, we've got Dan's first 4 weeks, then Dan's second 4 weeks down here, and Ashley Jones. We're not progressing at a linear format. It's undulating a little bit, okay? So they're sticking at some rep range for a longer period of time. So it's not that linear progression. Linear progression tends to work in the very early stages when people are just learning how to lift, and the strength improvements from coordination rather than strength itself. So we've got 4 sets of 10 at 60, 4 at 65, 3 sets at 80, and then 3 sets at 85%. Now across here, Ashley Jones is exactly the same as Dan's in that first 4 weeks. The only difference here is he's staying stable at this workload here, and that might be a down week, or just repeating that work on that week with the 3 sets of 80. So it's either a down or just not a progression as a way of having a down week. While Dan Baker over here has progressed up in his second 4 weeks to 3 at 8 at 75, 3 at 8 at 78, 3 at 4 at 90, then 3 at 4 at 92%. And again, they're graphed there. Now let's take a look at accumulation and intensification. So accumulation means basically means that you're accumulating usually volume, and that volume can be accumulated in terms of the number of reps in a session increasing, while intensification is an intensification of the load or intensity, while the volume in terms of reps is being lowered while that intensity goes up. So here we're developing a really good base of good volume to handle the work of the intensification to come. So in Dan Baker's first week, we've got 6 sets of 3 at 80, then it's 6 sets of 4 at 80, then 6 sets of 5 at 80, and then a down week here. So you can see here, what increases is the actual reps in that session, while the intensity across this 4 weeks stays the same. And why does it do that? They're trying to accumulate the volume. And 80% is pretty heavy, and there's some serious volume work getting done there. Now, Ashley Jones is exactly the same across the bottom, except in his 4th week, he's got 6 sets of 6 at 80% rather than this down week here. And why Dan has a down week there, he's looking at increasing the intensity here. So this is the intensification phase at the bottom. I wasn't able to find Ashley Jones's intensification work. So moving back to here, Dan has gone to 5 at 5 at 85. Now he's dropped it 4 at 4 at 90, 3 at 3 at 95, and then 2 at 2 at your old 100% RM here. So you've actually gone from being able to do 1 rep at a percentage, at 100%, to hopefully being able to do 2. So if you first got 200 in a squat back here for 1 rep, by the end of this cycle, it's hopefully you'll be able to get 2 reps at 200. And that's the idea of the accumulation and intensification. And it does take quite a lot of work there. You'd probably use this more in your pre-season than in season, particularly the accumulation side of things. The intensification, you could definitely use that across in your playing weeks. as long as you're placing it in the right time of the week there. So we've got wave-like 1. We do have an extra bonus, a second wave-like system as well. So across here we've got Dan using 3 sets of 10 at 60, 3 at 8 at 70, 3 at 6 at 80, and 3 at 6 at 85. And if we look across here, Ashley Jones is exactly the same. While Dan Baker in his second 4-week block has 3 sets of 8 at 75, 3 at 6 at 85, 3 at 5 at 90, and then 3 at 3 at 97. Okay, the other thing that I've done here across here is also again loaded in the reps down here. So you can actually see as that intensification is going up, the amount of reps is coming down in these cycles as well. So you can pause it there and take a quick look at the total number of reps in the session decreasing and the percentages of intensity increasing across that loading 4-week period. Now our last one, our wave-like 2. So I haven't put a plot across the other side there or a graph because if you look here, there's actually ranges. So let's take a look at Dan Baker's number 1 and the wave-like number 2. 3 sets of 10 at 60. Then we've got 10, 8, 6, and the percentage range from the first set to the last set is between 60 and 75. In week 3, we've got 8, 6, 5, and the percentages are 70 to 82%. In week 4, 6, 5, 3, 77 to 92%. Now, if we look down here, Ashley Jones has put in his work exactly the same. So you can see how similar they program and how successful they were for multiple years in completely different competitions. It makes you wonder, is their strength loading very, very sound? I'm sure it's progressed and changed a little bit, but looking at these 5 systems in terms of the simplest to the more complex at the end, their loading systems are very, very similar, almost exactly identical. Now, Dan in his second 4 weeks has got 10, 8, 6, 65 to 80%, 8, 6, 5, 75 to 87%, 6, 5, 3, 82 to 95, and his last week, 5, 3, 2, 87 to hopefully in that second week, 100% where you'll get hopefully 2 reps at your old 1RM. Now, hopefully you've really enjoyed this information. For it to soak in, you might need to watch it a couple of times. I'll have a lot more between week loading systems and reviews of different strength methods used. But all of this isn't as important, or loading is extremely important, but getting when you're loading it, why you're loading it, and your exercise selections and your biomechanical choices for skill execution correct is extremely important as well. Get those numbers right in between week loading systems, try some of these, but you've still got to program correctly in terms of where you place it in your week, what exercise selections you choose, because each sport will have little subtle differences, particularly when you look at rugby league and rugby union. Look at a prop in rugby union versus an outside back in rugby union versus a prop in rugby league and their role versus a prop in rugby union. So some of your exercise selections would be quite different based on those individual positions and what you're trying to look at and improve. If you would like to be coached by me, please click the link below for coaching. If you'd like to join our mastermind group where we go into even greater detail, where this video will sit there with actually even the worksheets on how to do that, please click the link below to learn more about that. If you've liked this video, please give it a thumbs up.